And now, please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, this is indeed your lucky day. You have the chance to be here in the Wellesley Hills Congregational Church. I can't think of a better place to be on a Sunday morning anywhere. We also have the chance to have the wonderful baptism of little Penny and have her behave so well. Thank you, Penny. But you also, in addition, have the chance to now listen to and study what I think is one of the more remarkable passages you'll find in the entire New Testament. Here you have a text. Jesus, before this text begins, has been in a debate with the Pharisees. Intense debating with those who disagree with him. And so as this text begins, Jesus needs a break. I mean, I understand that. I'm sure you all do too. Sometimes you just need a breather. So Jesus leaves Galilee and goes to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And there he goes into a house and closes the door just to get some peace and quiet. But there's a woman whose daughter has an unclean spirit. Now, we're not sure what this is. We're not sure what this ailment that the daughter suffered from was. Maybe she had some sort of mental illness. Anyone who's had a child with mental illness knows the struggles that can be. Maybe it's something else that we can't think of. Whatever it was enough to motivate the mother to go into the house and to throw herself at Jesus' feet. And there she asks him if he would heal her daughter. And then Jesus says what has to be one of the ugliest lines in the entire New Testament. Totally uncharacteristic from the mouth of Jesus. He turns to her and he says, "Let the children be fed first," that is, those who are Jewish. Because this woman was a Syrophoenician, she was a Greek, she was a Gentile, she was a non-Jew. And so Jesus says, "Let the children be fed first. For it's not fair to take a children's food and throw it to the dogs." Now, to realize at the time, a dog was not a common pet in a household. It wasn't the little fluff ball that you carry around. Dogs back then were wild dogs for the most part, out in the streets. Dogs were not positive things. They were scrawny and scavenging around. To call someone a dog was a pretty nasty insult. So here's this woman, this mother who wants to cure her daughter cured, and Jesus says, "You're a Gentile, you're not worthy of it," and then calls her a dog. Now you read various commentaries on this, and certain commentators try and tie themselves into pretzels to make this seem less harsh than it is. Other commentators can just leave the text as it is and says, Jesus was exhausted. This was him at his most human. And what's remarkable, though, is the mother's response. The mother responds by saying, "Lord." She says, "Kyrie" to him. Lord, she gives him honor, even though she swallows her pride so that she can say, "Lord, yes, but even the children eat the crumb, or even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the children's table." Yes, Lord, I'm not trying to say that, I'm not trying to push away your insult or get mad. I'm just saying, yes, but even the dogs deserve some crumbs. And in an instance that I don't think is repeated anywhere else in the New Testament, to my knowledge, Jesus changes his mind. He sees this woman, this mother, kneeling before him saying, "Please heal my daughter." She calls him out for his rudeness, and he says to himself, I was wrong. And he says, "For what you said, the demon has gone out of your daughter. She's been made well." I love this woman, this Syrophoenician woman. A hero in the New Testament in many ways. In the face of Jesus being ethnocentric, in the face of Jesus trying to keep the message of God to the Jews, this woman, the love of this mother for her child, forces Jesus to change his mind. From here on out, in the Gospel of Mark, the message of Jesus becomes one that affects Gentiles as well as Jews. He goes straight from this text actually right into the Decapolis, a largely Gentile region, to do healing there, right after this text. This one woman, unnamed, helps change the course of Jesus' ministry and by extension the world. So when I read this through, I have to say I am inspired by what the love of a mother can do. Now, it's no secret that I'm not exactly optimistic about the state of the world. On Easter Sunday, when I got up and sort of, especially the 9 a.m. service was going on about some of the struggles that face us, there were some folks who showed up just to Easter and they were just like, gosh, I wanted like Easter bunnies and cotton candy, and you gave me a little bit too much reality. But sometimes it's hard to avoid what's going on in the world. And there are a lot of people that are looking for solutions. The other day I was reading a wonderful transcript of the interview between Ross Douthat, the New York Times columnist, and Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, one of the largest hedge funds in the world. It's a great interview, by the way. I would encourage you to listen to it or read it. And Dalio's breaking down what he sees as some of the struggles, and he names some things that he wants as solutions. Like he says, hey, we got to keep our deficits to 3% of GDP. And then he's like, yeah, but I don't think that's going to happen. He's not very optimistic about certain public policy solutions. But you know what does give me hope? This text here. And the chance that some of the healing of the world, maybe what we need, are more mothers in charge. Back in 1980, Candace Lightner had her daughter, Carrie, age 13, killed by a drunk driver. And this was a drunk driver who had multiple DUI convictions before this. And Candace Lightner, rather than let her grief overwhelm her, which she very well was justified in doing, ended up founding Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And by 1984, the drinking age had been raised from 18 to 21, and the penalties around drunk driving had been transformed, and the culture around drinking and driving had been transformed. Mothers around the country saved tens of thousands of lives through their actions. During the 19th century, back then, basically the beginning of distilled liquor in the United States, they didn't water it down to 40% alcohol by volume. This was potent stuff. And trouble with alcohol was a big deal in America at the time. And it was mothers, it was wives who got together and started the temperance movement, and were the driving force behind the temperance movement. The Women's Christian Temperance Union was one of the most effective organizations of organizing in American history, organized by mothers. And one of the things that makes mothers so effective and gives me such hope is that it's hard to say no to the mother who loves her child. There's a certain humanity to that. My sister-in-law, who lives in Winnetka, Illinois, a community very similar to this one of the things that fires her up is gun violence in schools. She's a mother, and she's done a lot of activism on this, and she's not a naturally activist person. But she's like, as a mother, I shouldn't be afraid that something's going to happen to my child when he or she goes off to school that day. Whatever solution has to come up, we have to come up with something. It's kind of hard to say no to a mother's love. I think of in this very congregation, I see Stacy here, Stacy Lerner. Sorry, Stacy, for calling you out. I see Stacy here, or Amanda Crowley. And I think of the work that they've done on behalf of their children to advocate for pandas awareness, for better care for children, and by their advocacy, as mothers who love their children, being able to make our country, our society, a better place. I think about Christine giving a moving testimony a couple weeks ago. Issues of war and peace are complicated, and Christians have a lot to say on them. But it's important to humanize any of these theoretical discussions by the testimony of a mother who loves her son who's currently in harm's way trying to defend our freedoms. the power of a mother's love. The other thing about mothers that makes them so effective is that mothers tend to be really well connected. No offense to the guys out there, but statistically, guys are much more isolated. Especially as men get older, it becomes harder to form friendships. But women seem to be better at this and seem to have all these deep connections. And connections are essential for trying to get anything done and moving society forward. And these connections that link us together don't necessarily have to be blood connections. When I was down in Houston, Texas, there was a woman who was she could be problematic at times in the congregation. At her funeral, some of her friends got up and described her euphemistically as colorful. And I remember sitting there at Anne's bedside when she was sick, Anne Getch. And she and I hadn't really connected before this moment, and we were talking. And she's a lesbian, and she talked about how in the 1980s, she and her friends became like mothers and sisters to their gay friends who were dying of AIDS. And how they would go down and give blood as often as they could so that those men could have blood transfusions and have their lives get a little better. Those connections and seeing those connections and then acting on them, making the world a better place. I see mothers, and one thing that strikes me about mothers is that, in my experience anyway, mothers are really tough. They're persistent. They have a sense of endurance to see things through. Look at this mother in Mark 7. There she is in front of Jesus, persistent to advocate for her child. Then there's the classic example of the New Testament. At the foot of the cross, on Good Friday, where were the men? They were gone. Where was the mother of Jesus? Where were the other women? They were there at the foot of the cross. They had that persistence, that fearlessness. And they were the ones that went to the tomb on Easter Sunday just to pay their respects and anoint the body. When I was writing my novel on Nigeria, I ran across a story that I loved that I'd never heard before. In the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, where all the oil comes out of, there are a lot of small tribes that have been neglected over time. The major tribes sort of control Nigeria, and all the oil wealth from the Delta was sucked out of the Delta and distributed to people that were not part of these tribes. So in addition to not getting the benefit from the oil revenue, you also have this incredible pollution. It's estimated that the equivalent of an Exxon Valdez spills every year in the Niger Delta to pollute that region. And so in the 1990s, there was this peaceful movement to try and get justice, but Sani Abacha, the dictator, then executed some of these people. This was a dangerous time. But in 2002, 600 women, mostly middle-aged and elderly, dressed in traditional garb, walked in and took over the Chevron oil facility in Warri, Nigeria. And these women sat down nonviolently and said, we want jobs for our kids, and we want to be able to drink clean water and breathe clean air. And the model of these women was such that the authorities didn't know what to do with them. And one of the stories I read talked about how in the Ija culture, in one of these tribes, that one of the most shameful things that could happen is if an elderly woman would strip down naked as a point of shame against someone else. And as some of these people tried to threaten them, they threatened them back. Do you really want me to strip down and see what happens there? And these good Nigerian men being like, no, we'll just let you sit right there. And they won concessions as mothers for the people they loved. There are a lot of things that are wrong in our society, sure, and a lot of pain. But maybe one of the ways through is listening to mothers more frequently. Having them talk about the love of their children, helping us to connect with other people more deeply across different lines, and persisting through what could be some difficult times ahead. Feminist theology in the 70s and 80s brought up a lot of different things. One of the things they brought up was that traditional images of God tended to have a patriarchal lens. God as the old white man in the sky having power over other people. And so feminist theologians said, hey, there's also other images in the Bible about God. And one of the images they lift up is the image in Proverbs 8 of God as wisdom, God as Sophia. God is the wisdom through which the whole creation was given birth. And that's an image that I want you to hold on to. Can we think about God as wisdom as opposed to power over? Can we think of where that wisdom might lead us? And on this Mother's Day, can we seek out the wisdom of mothers?